There are 17 interconnected goals developed by the United Nations to establish sustainable development. Today, we will be focusing on the second goal to achieve zero hunger. The United Nations establishes that the second goal is to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture and food systems. According to the Close the Gap Foundation, the objective is to ensure that everyone has access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and preferences, and that all people have the ability to acquire the food they need without compromising their economic, social, and environmental well-being. Zero hunger is important to achieve because, according to researchers at the National Library of Medicine, it is well known that humans need food in order to survive. When people lack access to sufficient foods that meet their dietary needs for an active and healthy life, food insecurity results. Nearly 11% of the world's total population suffers from undernourishment. This is a substantial portion of the global population. A lack of access to food can lead to malnutrition, weakened immune systems, and ultimately life-threatening health complications. The source goes on to predict that by 2050, world population will increase by 2 billion, bringing the world total to 10 billion. This will bring a high demand on limited resources, most notably on food supplies. The United Nations state that food security and nutrition situations remain dire, with an increase of 122 million people compared to 2019 are facing world hunger now. The World Food Program states that almost half of the global population has uncertainty about where their next meal will come from, typically due to financial constraints. The global population is projected to continue growing, increasing pressure on agricultural systems to produce more food. To meet the demands of the population, an increase in crop plant production will be needed, but the increase of temperature and climate events are expected to affect agricultural productivity, leading to crop failures, reduced yields, and a loss of arable land. Another challenge is the loss of water resources, soil, and biodiversity. They pose challenges to food production. Competition for natural resources between agriculture and urbanization can limit food production and access. Juba is the capital and largest city of South Sudan, one of the least developed countries due to conflict, poverty, and disruption of social services. Being an undeveloped country calls for South Sudan to face several challenges contributing to achieving zero hunger. Juba is the commercial center for agricultural products in the area. 80% of South Sudan's population is rural and depends on agricultural practices like farming and livestock for their food, but only roughly 4% of that land is cultivated. Limited cultivated land and resources causes scarce labor and farming opportunities, leading to economic instability. Over half of the population lives on less than $1 a day. Limited agriculture can hinder economic development, disallowing farming and trade opportunities to grow and sell crops and raise livestock for money. Poverty has resulted in political warfare. The lack of access, share, and affordable agricultural resources results in overall food insecurity, which also influences crime. War in Juba is caused by competition over access to power and resources. This has caused violence and food shortages. Ongoing violence continues to keep people from their homes, damage markets by looting supplies, and disrupt planting. Because of the fighting, people who would normally grow crops have been far away from their land, running and hiding from the violence, unable to plant. The conflict in Juba, the breadbasket of South Sudan, has aggravated the food shortage. Poverty is a major contribution to South Sudan's food insecurity because of the unequal distribution of income. South Sudan is one of the most oil-dependent and poorest economies in the world. Income distribution is unequal because the revenues from oil, their only income, goes to the government. Juba is the political center of South Sudan, and it implements policies across the country, but is yet to equally distribute their only source of revenue amongst the nation. Food access thus depends on household income. You can't acquire food if you are living on the reality of less than $1 a day. People in South Sudan rely on food aid, but allocated food rations have been cut by 30% due to funding constraints. Juba is responsible for providing an environment for humanitarian operations to coordinate food aid across the country. Not being able to sustain enough money limits the ability for organizations to provide and distribute food supplies for the population, increasing food security and poverty. Juba has environmental concerns that further limit agricultural opportunities that draw back food security, such as urbanization. People from all over the country are moving to the capital to flee from violence outside of rural living. The increase of people in Juba has caused for the conversion of agricultural land into urban areas. This reduces the availability of land for food production in Juba. This is significant because Juba is relied on for agricultural production for surrounding areas. With less land, less food can be produced. With land urbanizing, more people will move to Juba Juba with more mouths to feed. South Sudan is suffering from ongoing conflict as well as droughts and floods from climate change. The variations of weather patterns impacts agricultural and food productivity. Droughts can lead to the inability for crops to grow, while floods can destroy crops that have grown. The unprecedented, multi-year flood sweeping the country is exacerbating high levels of hunger caused by ongoing conflict. Climate change causes droughts, floods, and erratic rainfall patterns, leading to reduced water availability, crop failures, and livestock losses. Competition over these resources can escalate conflicts between communities, particularly in regions with tribal divisions such as Juba. The main social consideration relevant in Juba and all of South Sudan is conflict. According to the Food Assistance Fact Sheet, a rise in conflict prevents people from moving to look for food. Households who did not harvest are at risk of hunger because of this. Violence prevents relief actors from delivering food assistance for a prolonged period. Discriminatory social norms restrict women from participating in agricultural practices as well as not having land ownership rights, preventing them from growing crops to use and sell for income. South Sudanese society favors traditional customs with men controlling land. Considering the population in Juba is nearly half women, this is substantial. Limited hands on agriculture restricts food in Juba and all of South Sudan, considering Juba is a hub for food supply chain in the country. The unequal revenues and funding constraints disallows South Sudan easy access to food. However, there are areas of strength the region has that can be looked at if there was a shift in paradigm. South Sudan is high in natural resources like oil. Sustainable management and responsible exploitation of these resources can contribute to economic diversification and poverty reduction. Urbanization in Juba has decreased crop growth opportunity, and the effects of climate change result in poor agriculture and scarce resources, implementing overall chaos. South Sudan has underlying areas of strength that could be used for environmental improvements. Their authentic lands provide a strong foundation for agricultural development. If a paradigm shift is made by steering the area of focus from urbanizing the region to investing in farming techniques, the country can increase crop yields and enhance food security for its population, which would result in less chaos and sustainable land management practices like reforestation and soil conservation can help store carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and preserve biodiversity, improving climate change. Crime and gender disparity are prevalent, which prevents the distribution of food and restricts land for crop growth, but these issues can be resolved with yet again a simple paradigm shift. You can't cooperate in sustaining a civil society when not each citizen has opportunity or equal rights. If dialogue was exchanged amongst all ethnic groups, government representatives, and citizens, mutual respect would be established. The decrease in conflict would allow for the distribution of food amongst each other and different countries to take place. By women being allowed to have access to land, more crops could be grown, providing more food, money, and less tension. The common theme among South Sudan's areas of weaknesses improving is a paradigm shift. If South Sudan changed their lenses, their food insecurity could turn into food security. If they sustainably managed their natural resources and distributed their revenues from them, more citizens would be in a financial situation where they could afford food. If their ideal lands were preserved instead of being urbanized, there would be more room and sustainable soil for crop growth. More agricultural land would also allow more job opportunity for people to farm, buy, and sell crops. Implementing sustainable land management can help withdraw carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and preserve biodiversity, which would preserve the nutritional quality of food systems. If all citizens were given equal opportunity, an increase of crops could be grown by more citizens, along with the reduction of violence over rights and resources. A simple shift of paradigm would make this food insecure nation secure.